I ordered the low cholesterol special, and the cheese sandwich is not low in cholesterol.
You know why? When Mom mixes a can with relish, mayonnaise, and celery, we have 4 meat sandwiches.
Maybe it's time you took a roast beef break with Hardee's big, beautiful roast beef sandwich.
If you've never had meatloaf between 2 slices of white bread, you haven't truly tasted the 70s. The 1970s weren't just loud in fashion, they were loud in flavor. Some sandwiches will make you nostalgic, others will make you question everything. But all of them? Worth a bite before you go. If breakfast and lunch ever had a baby, it would probably look like the Denver sandwich. And no, this has nothing to do with Colorado. It just happens to be the name that stuck. Picture this: chopped ham, bell peppers, and onions folded into a golden omelet, then squished between 2 slices of toasted white bread that crackle at the corners. It was the kind of meal that rolled straight off a diner griddle and onto your plate with no apologies. There was no syrup, no fancy garnish, just a sandwich that worked as hard as you did. People on their way to double shifts or cranking their station wagon heaters on winter mornings lived for this. It was breakfast without needing a plate, a fork, or even a break in your morning routine. The egg made it feel like something your mom would cook, while the sandwich form made it fast enough to eat one-handed while pumping gas. Somehow both comforting and chaotic, it became a regular in greasy spoons across the country. You could smell it before it even hit the table. And while the Denver sandwich was bold, our next one turned cheap meat into high art, or at least into something that sizzled like it mattered. You know it is serious when your childhood lunch starts with a loud sizzle. Fried Bologna and mustard was never supposed to be a star. It was just something people made when they ran out of ideas or groceries. But it had that wild card charm. Thick-cut Bologna, the kind with that red plastic skin you had to peel off, got tossed on a hot skillet until it puffed like a mini volcano. It would curl at the edges, crispy and brown, and just when you thought it was done, it would start to sing. Slap that onto a slice of Wonder Bread, squeeze on yellow mustard like you mean it, and top it with another slice. No lettuce, no tomato, no distractions. This was the sandwich that knew what it was. It smelled like school lunches and weekend trips to the lake. It was cheap, easy, and always hit the spot. Nobody was trying to impress anybody with this, but somehow it never let you down. The meat might have been humble, but it had attitude, and the mustard made sure it got noticed. Now, if that one felt like a memory, wait until we talk about the sandwich that brought the diner straight to your house, griddle grease and all. The patty melt was not just a sandwich, it was a lifestyle. It belonged to truck stops, corner booths, and places where the waitress calls you hon. Start with a beef patty, not too thick, not too thin, grilled until the edges charred just enough. Then pile on caramelized onions so sweet they practically melt, and drop a couple of slices of Swiss cheese on top until it oozes over like lava. But the crown jewel? That rye bread, buttered and toasted right on the griddle. It soaked up everything. The beefy drippings, the onion sweetness, the crispy edges of the cheese. Every bite was a perfect mix of crunchy and gooey, salty and buttery. You were not just eating a sandwich, you were biting into pure diner energy. People had this at lunch and still talked about it at dinner. If your parents ever made this at home, you were one of the lucky ones. And if not, you probably still remember your first time trying one and realizing a sandwich could actually stop time. But not every sandwich needed to be hot off the grill. Some came cold, weirdly fancy, and straight from the pages of a church cookbook. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on Pumpern Nickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time, or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped so fine they could sneak into your taste buds before your brain caught on, mixed with cream cheese until it was a spread so thick it stuck to the knife like it had a mission. All of that smeared onto a slice of deep dark pumpernickel that practically demanded you respect it. It was not flashy, it was not sweet, and no kid was trading their cookie for it, but it had an edge, the kind of flavor that got better the more you chewed. Somewhere along the way, this party appetizer snuck into lunchboxes, Tupperware, and even a few kitchen counters at 2 in the morning. It was strange, but it made sense. The 70s were weird like that. Spreads were suddenly sandwiches and finger food was fair game. Of course, if you thought cold spreads were wild, wait until you see what happens when tuna salad goes face to face with a broiler. Now this one had drama. The tuna boat melt was not just a sandwich, it was an event. You start with a sub roll, soft in the middle, split open like it is waiting for a miracle. In goes a scoop of tuna salad, but not the watery kind. This was chunky, mayo-rich, maybe with a little celery if you were lucky. Then come the tomato slices, thin, juicy, and laid down like armor. And finally, cheddar cheese, shredded, sliced, whatever worked, blanketing the whole thing like a warm hug. Slide the whole sandwich under a broiler and wait. That is the moment things change. The edges of the bread crisp up, the cheese bubbles and browns, and the tomato softens just enough to soak into the tuna. You pull it out just in time to stop it from burning, but almost wish it had. This was the sandwich version of comfort food theater. It smelled like warmth. It looked like golden perfection. It tasted like something way fancier than it was. Parents made it to use up tuna, but kids remembered it like a feast. But if this one was golden, wait until you meet the sandwich that vanished from lunch counters just as fast as it appeared. If you were a regular at lunch counters in the 1970s, there was one cold cut that had a mysterious charm: pickle and pimento loaf. It had a look that was hard to ignore. A pale pink meat dotted with bright green pickle bits and tiny flecks of red pimento, like a mosaic made by someone who really loved sandwiches. It came sliced thin from behind the deli glass, slapped between white bread with a dab of mayonnaise, and wrapped in wax paper with a soda on the side. You did not question it. You just ate it. The flavor? Tangy, savory, and weirdly sweet, but not in a bad way. It had the texture of Bolognia, the bite of pickle, and the color scheme of a Christmas tree. For some reason, it vanished from most grocery shelves by the end of the decade. Maybe tastes changed, or maybe we just stopped putting pickles inside our meat. But back then, it was an easy go-to, a bit of fun, and a total conversation starter if you pulled it out during lunch break. Of course, if you thought that sandwich was messy looking, just wait until we dive into the one that was literally impossible to eat without getting sauce all over your hands and loving it. There is nothing tidy about a sloppy Joe, and that is the whole point. These school cafeteria icons had one mission: to hit like a flavor bomb and leave a trail behind. Tangy ground beef cooked with tomato paste, onions, and whatever seasoning the lunch lady felt like using that day. Scooped in a steaming pile onto soft hamburger buns that were usually a little too small. You would take one bite, and the filling would slide out the other side like it was trying to escape. Your hands? Covered. Your tray? A disaster. Your smile? Huge. They were sweet, salty, savory, and just chaotic enough to make lunch feel like a party. Even the name sounded like something you should not be allowed to say in class. Sloppy Joes were not reserved for fancy moments. They were served with plastic forks and half a chocolate milk carton. But they became legendary. Maybe it was because they tasted like comfort food mixed with rebellion. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one ever got through one without needing extra napkins. Either way, it earned its place in the Sandwich Hall of Fame. But what if I told you there was a sandwich out there that combined egg, gravy, and a hamburger bun, and somehow made it work? Now this one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The egg foo young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 sense on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The egg foo young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. Creamed chipped beef on toast, or as anyone who ever served in the military will tell you, SOS. No, not a cry for help, though it looked like one. This was dried beef, shredded and stirred into a thick, milky white sauce with a bit of pepper and sometimes a touch of Worcestershire if you were fancy. Then it got spooned over toast, or biscuits, or whatever bread you had. It was a direct descendant of World War II rations. But by the 1970s, it had made its way into American homes, school cafeterias, and greasy spoon diners across the country. It was salty. It was creamy. It looked like a mistake, but somehow it kept getting made and loved. It was affordable, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Parents made it because it used cheap pantry ingredients. Diners served it with coffee refills. Kids ate it because they did not know any better, then grew up craving it again. It might not be pretty, but it is unforgettable. Still, not everything on this list is heavy. Some sandwiches were just simple, clever ways to use what was left on the breakfast table, and a little sweet on the side. There is something dangerously comforting about mixing bacon grease with anything sweet, and that is exactly what bacon and apple butter on white bread was. You take crisp, salty bacon, still warm from the skillet, and press it into a slice of soft white bread that has been generously smeared with apple butter. That is it. No lettuce, no cheese, no rules. The combination was 100% homemade magic. It tasted like fall mornings, cast iron skillets, and someone's grandma telling you not to eat too fast. Apple butter gave it this rich, spiced flavor that clung to your mouth just long enough for the bacon to come crashing through. It was smoky. It was sweet. It was not trying to impress anyone. The real win here was in how it reused leftovers. If breakfast was done, and you had a few stray strips of bacon and a jar of apple butter on hand, this sandwich practically made itself. The kind of thing you whipped up while the coffee was still brewing. Maybe it never made it to a diner menu, but it made it to enough hearts to matter. And speaking of sandwiches that mattered, let us talk about the skyscraper of cold cuts that ruled every diner plate with a toothpick flag on top. The club sandwich was never shy about making an entrance. This was the sandwich equivalent of wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue. Triple layered, cut diagonally, and always served with a cocktail toothpick jabbed right through the middle like a victory flag, the classic clubhouse was a masterclass in controlled chaos. You had turkey, ham, and bacon stacked with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise on white toast, then doubled up like it had something to prove. One bite, and you got the salty crunch of bacon, the cool snap of lettuce, the savory chew of ham, and that creamy mayo keeping everything glued together. It was tall. It was filling. It was an edible tower of American lunch pride. You could find it at diners, roadside motels, airport cafes, and your Aunt Linda's house on a Sunday afternoon. No one ever finished a club sandwich without looking like they'd just solved a puzzle. Picking it up was half the battle. Eating it cleanly? Impossible. But satisfying? Always. This was the sandwich you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were doing something important. And while this one wore its sandwich royalty crown proudly, the next one took a completely different route, turning cheap lunch meat into the closest thing we ever got to pizza on a bun. Now, Bologna is not what you would call glamorous, but in the 1970s, someone took that humble meat and turned it into a straight-up miracle. Enter the Bologna pizza sandwich. This was not a joke, it was genius. You start with a soft hamburger bun, maybe left over from the weekend cookout. On the bottom half, you lay down a slice of Bologna, and if you are doing it right, you give it a quick sizzle in a frying pan so the edges curl up like a little meatball. Then you spoon on tomato sauce, canned, homemade, whatever you have, and top it with shredded mozzarella. After that, into the broiler it goes. What comes out is pure nostalgia with melted cheese dripping down the sides and the edges of the Bologna just crispy enough to give it bite. It smelled like school lunch and after-school cartoons. This was a sandwich that did not care what anyone thought. It was pizza-inspired, budget-friendly, and full of attitude. A little greasy? Sure. A little weird? Absolutely. But no one ever forgot their first one. But if Bologna in a broiler felt like a stretch, get ready for the canned spread that showed up in lunchboxes, picnic baskets, and every pantry with a shelf of shame, and somehow stayed beloved. You knew the Red Devil logo before you ever tasted it. That Underwood deviled ham can had a certain energy to it, bold, strange, and just a little too happy for what was inside. Still, one taste and you got it. Deviled ham salad was the low-key hero of school lunches and late-night sandwiches. It was creamy, salty, a little tangy, and just weird enough to make you wonder how it became so popular. Mix that canned meat paste with mayonnaise and relish, maybe a dash of mustard if you were daring, and you had a spread that knew how to work a slice of white bread. It was chilled, it was comforting, and it stuck to the roof of your mouth like a secret you could not wait to tell. This was the kind of sandwich you did not brag about, but secretly loved. And it was there for you, on road trips, in brown bags, and even at midnight when you could not sleep. It never looked fancy, but it never needed to. Deviled ham was a flavor bomb dressed up like a cold cut. But if you wanted something a little fresher, a little more deli style, then nothing hit quite like a stack of corned beef with a side of slaw and just enough spice to make you pay attention. Now we are talking classic. Corned beef and coleslaw on seeded rye is one of those sandwiches that knew how to make an entrance without raising its voice. You would find it wrapped in wax paper at your local deli or sitting proud on a tray next to a pickle spear and a bag of chips. The corned beef was thin sliced but packed with punch, salty, tender, and just fatty enough to remind you this was not diet food. Then came the slaw. Not too creamy, not too dry, with just the right crunch to cut through the richness of the meat. Pile that high between two slices of seeded rye, sturdy, peppery, with that classic bite, and you had something special. This was the kind of sandwich that told you to sit down and take your time. It did not rush. It did not play games. It was the kind of thing you ordered when you wanted to feel like an adult, even if you were still wearing platform shoes and listening to disco on cassette. Deli counters made legends, and this one was a heavy hitter. But if corned beef was too bold for your taste, there was always its milder cousin, the quiet, sweet-talking ham salad that somehow became a staple without anyone noticing. Ham salad was the sandwich that crept into your life without warning and just stayed. It was never flashy, never demanding, but it had a way of showing up when you needed it most. Diced ham, usually the leftovers from Sunday dinner, got chopped fine and tossed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and maybe a squirt of yellow mustard or a spoonful of Miracle Whip if you were feeling wild. It was smooth, creamy, with just enough tang to make you wonder why you did not eat it more often. Spread it thick on soft white bread. Throw on a lettuce leaf if you're trying to be classy, and you had a sandwich that felt like summer picnics and small-town potlucks. It tasted like home. Like old Tupperware containers pulled from the fridge and packed into a picnic basket with a bag of chips and a slice of pie wrapped in foil. No one ever called it their favorite, but no one turned it down either. That is the magic of ham salad. It stayed in the background, steady and familiar. But not every sandwich played it safe. Some brought the heat, and maybe a little spice from south of the border. Way before anyone was throwing around the word fusion, people were already stuffing taco night into a sandwich roll and calling it lunch. The taco-inspired ground beef sandwich was a bold, brilliant mess of spicy ground beef seasoned with chili powder, cumin, and whatever was on hand. This was the 70s after all. If it came in a seasoning packet, it was probably fair game. The meat got piled high into a soft hoagie roll, topped with shredded cheddar, crisp lettuce, and sometimes a few sad tomatoes trying to keep up. Every bite was an explosion of salty heat and melty cheese. It was not clean, it was not elegant, but it was delicious. This was comfort food that was borrowed from the taco truck before taco trucks were even a thing. You could find it at school cafeterias, mom-and-pop diners, and even in the occasional backyard cookout where somebody decided to get creative. The bread soaked up all that seasoned grease, and somehow it just worked. You were not going to win any awards for presentation, but your taste buds would be too busy partying to care. And speaking of comfort food with attitude, the next sandwich on our list came straight from the king himself, and probably your aunt's frying pan. Elvis did not invent the grilled peanut butter and banana sandwich, but he sure made it famous. This was a sandwich with soul. It started simple. 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick slather of peanut butter, and banana slices lined up like records on a shelf. Then, just when you thought it was done, someone threw it on a griddle with butter until it crisped and caramelized into something magical. The peanut butter melted, the banana got warm and gooey, and the outside toasted to golden brown perfection. It was sweet, salty, sticky, and just a little over the top, like every good memory from a Saturday morning. Whether you were 5 or 50, this sandwich hit all the right notes. Some people added honey, others tossed in bacon, and a few adventurous souls even threw in some cinnamon. But the classic version stood tall, proud, and a little indulgent. It was the kind of sandwich your aunt made when she wanted to spoil you without breaking the bank. It filled you up, slowed you down, and made you feel like life was okay, if only for a moment. But if you thought Elvis had taste, wait until you see what happens when Spam and pineapple get tossed into the same sandwich and actually make sense. Spam and pineapple might sound like a dare, but in the 1970s, it was practically dinner. This sandwich was all about stretching the rules and the budget. A thick slice of Spam got pan-fried until it was brown and crispy around the edges, then placed on a hamburger bun like it belonged there. Then came the twist, a pineapple ring right on top. Not fresh pineapple, mind you. We are talking about the canned kind, sweet and syrupy, straight from the tin. The two came together like an accidental masterpiece, salty, smoky Spam playing off the sugary tang of the pineapple in a way that confused your brain but delighted your taste buds. Some people added a bit of mustard, others just left it at that. Either way, it was weirdly good. Spam was everywhere during the war and stuck around long after, and by the 70s, folks had gotten creative with it. This sandwich was born out of necessity and stayed for nostalgia. It was quick, affordable, and always sparked conversation. Even if you did not like it, you remembered it. But if you were not into tropical flair, maybe you preferred your cheese melted and broiled to golden glory, open-faced and unapologetically old school. The cheese dream was the grilled cheese's show-off cousin, open-faced, broiled, and served hot enough to burn the roof of your mouth if you were not careful. It started with a single slice of white bread, toasted just enough to hold its own. On top went a generous pile of shredded cheese. Cheddar was the go-to, but sometimes you got American or a mystery blend from a bag. Then came the real twist, a tomato slice right on top, dusted with paprika for color and just a little kick. Under the broiler it went, bubbling and browning until it looked like something straight off the back of a recipe card. It was humble, sure, but it had flair. You would see these at lunch counters, Sunday night dinners, and school lunch trays where the budget was tight but the flavor still mattered. The tomato added a bit of freshness. The paprika made it feel just fancy enough. And the cheese? Well, that was always the star. It was a small thing, but it delivered big. The cheese dream was a one-slice wonder, a reminder that sometimes the best sandwiches don't even have a top. But if you wanted something a little more refined, a little cooler, and straight from the country club, the next sandwich knew exactly how to dress for the occasion. Shrimp salad rolls were the fancy cousin who only showed up at baby showers and bridal brunches, but when they did, they made sure you noticed. These sandwiches were served cold, creamy, and full of old-school charm. Chopped shrimp got mixed with mayonnaise, a little diced celery for crunch, and maybe a squeeze of lemon juice if the recipe came from someone who read food magazines. The mix got spooned onto a buttered roll, soft, pillowy, and lightly toasted if you were lucky. It was rich but light, simple but elevated. You were not scarfing it down with fries and soda. No, this one came with iced tea in a glass and maybe a napkin folded just right. It was the kind of sandwich that made you sit a little straighter. Perfect for luncheons, community cookbooks, and any moment where finger foods and floral plates were involved. But here is the thing. It was good. Really good. The shrimp brought just enough sweetness. The celery kept it from being too heavy, and the bread soaked it all in without falling apart. It was a sandwich that whispered luxury in a decade where not much else did. And if shrimp salad was for special occasions, the next sandwich took something sacred, Thanksgiving dinner, and made it work any day of the week. The turkey and cranberry sandwich was a straight-up post-holiday miracle. For decades, it was the unsung hero of Thanksgiving leftovers. But somewhere in the 1970s, it graduated. This was no longer just a thing you threw together on Black Friday. It became a deli menu regular, a cold-cut superstar. Thinly sliced roast turkey, piled high on hearty sandwich bread, usually with a swipe of mayonnaise or stuffing if you were lucky. Then came the game changer, cranberry sauce. Not the fancy kind either. We are talking about the jiggly canned stuff that still held the shape of the tin. Spread it on thick and it brought a tart sweet punch that made the dry turkey sing. The contrast of savory meat with that jammy cranberry hit your mouth like a leftover-themed love letter. And the best part? You did not need a holiday to eat it. It was portable nostalgia, a bite-sized reminder of family dinners and paper plates stacked high. Every bite was warm, even when served cold. But if cranberry sauce and turkey were a love story, the next sandwich was more like a wild experiment that somehow worked, one that turned a jar of spread and a couple pickles into a lunchtime classic. Let's be honest, pimento cheese spread does not sound like the kind of thing that would stick with you. But in the 1970s, it did. This was the sandwich you pulled from a metal lunchbox with a thermos to match. Kraft pimento cheese came in a little glass jar, neon orange and suspiciously shiny. Spread it onto white or wheat bread, top it with a layer of sweet pickles, and what you got was a flavor combo that somehow tasted like home. The creaminess of the cheese, the vinegary bite of the pickles, and that soft bread just soaking it all in, it hit differently. No toasting, no grilling, just a cold sandwich, plain and proud. It was a sandwich that looked like it was made in 5 minutes because it probably was. But that was the whole point. It was easy, cheap, and oddly comforting. You saw it at picnics, in school bags, and on paper plates at neighborhood block parties. And while it might not be the most elegant thing on this list, it never pretended to be anything it wasn't. But if you were feeling brave or just really nostalgic, the next sandwich took a sharp left into strong flavors, bold textures, and a rye bread that meant business. Liverwurst and onion on rye was not a sandwich. It was a statement. You either loved it or you avoided it like a dare. The liverwurst, soft and rich with a meaty tang, was spread thick, almost like a pâté with working-class credentials. Then came the raw onions, sliced paper-thin, sharp, and unapologetic. Pile it onto a dense slice of seeded rye, and you had something that hit all the old-school delicatessen notes. This was the sandwich your grandfather ordered with black coffee and a quiet nod. It was earthy, bold, and not even trying to please everybody. The rye gave it a chewy backbone, the onions brought the fire, and the liverwurst, well, it brought back memories. German, Polish, and Jewish communities kept this sandwich alive and thriving well into the 1970s, and for good reason. It filled you up, it had depth, and it never held back. Even if you were not totally into liverwurst, odds are you tasted it at least once and remembered exactly where you were when it happened. And if liverwurst was old world bold, then the next sandwich brought the southern backyard flavor, with just a hint of sweet sauce and a soft roll to tie it all together. BBQ chicken in the 1970s was a backyard dream, but when you packed it into a sandwich, that was where the magic happened. Picture this: pressure-cooked chicken, shredded until it practically melts in your fingers, then soaked in a sticky sweet barbecue sauce that was heavy on the brown sugar, light on the smoke, and all about that southern charm. No fancy rubs, no mesquite wood, just good sauce and thyme. Scoop that hot, saucy goodness onto a fresh Kaiser roll and watch it disappear. The bread soaked up every bit of that tangy, sweet heat, turning each bite into a juicy, handheld meal. Some folks added pickles, others dropped in coleslaw. But at its core, it was pure 1970s comfort food, straight from the slow cooker or stovetop pot. It was perfect for potlucks, church picnics, and family dinners where everyone wore wide collars and polyester. It stuck with you, literally and emotionally. Every bite was messy, sticky, and totally worth the napkin pile you built along the way. But while this sandwich brought the meat, the next one proved you did not need any at all to steal the show. Just a skillet, some zucchini, and a bit of melted cheddar. Back in the 1970s, vegetarian food was still finding its groove, but the zucchini and cheese melt was one of those quiet wins tucked away in the spiral-bound cookbooks of every mom who wanted something different. Start with sliced zucchini, sautéed in a bit of butter with onions, maybe some garlic or dried herbs if you were fancy. Cook it down until it is tender and fragrant. Then pile it onto a slice of whole wheat bread and smother it in shredded cheddar. Into the oven it went, broiled until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. This was not a salad disguised as a sandwich. It was hearty, warm, and full of flavor. The zucchini gave it body, the cheese gave it soul, and the bread held it all together like it was born for this. You did not miss the meat. That was the surprise. It was the kind of sandwich that popped up when the fridge looked empty, but your mom still made something work. It smelled like love and tasted like something healthier than it had any right to be. And while this one kept things wholesome, the next sandwich leaned full tilt into deli classics: meat, stuffing, and a layer of post-holiday leftovers you could eat any day of the year. During the Great Depression, food scarcity pushed resourcefulness to new heights, turning even backyard weeds into life-saving nourishment. A prime example was the Dandelion Greens sandwich, made from tender, freshly foraged dandelion greens sautéed briefly in bacon drippings or butter, proving the old adage true: one person's weed is another person's lunch. Dandelions flourished freely, thriving on roadsides and lawns, offering a nutritious, vitamin-rich option readily available to anyone willing to forage. Interestingly, dandelions weren't always considered nuisances. Settlers historically cultivated them for their nutritional value, containing more iron and calcium than many grocery store greens today. During the Depression, families who knew this little fact relied heavily on these wild greens to fill nutritional gaps left by their otherwise sparse meals. With fats like butter or precious bacon drippings in short supply, home cooks learned to carefully ration these staples, just enough to tame the green's natural bitterness. Ironically, modern gardeners battle relentlessly against dandelions with chemicals and lawnmowers, unaware their ancestors would have gladly turned that lawn invasion into supper. If there's one sandwich you can never go wrong with, it's the old-fashioned grilled cheese sandwich. This one is the epitome of comfort food, and Grandma's version was a childhood favorite. Even the pickiest eaters used to beg for this one. So this one became popular during the Great Depression era, when we had to make do with three of the most common ingredients in our pantries: bread, cheese, and butter. Now, some of us used to get creative with our grilled cheese by adding extras like sliced tomatoes, ham, bacon, or even pickles. But this one was best enjoyed simple and plain. Oh, and let's not forget, it tastes even better when paired with a warm bowl of tomato soup. Before burgers and fries, grilled cheese and tomato soup used to be the ultimate food combo of our dreams. The best part? Most cheese sandwiches are vegetarian and can easily be made vegan by adjusting the type of cheese and oil. Back in the harsh realities of the Great Depression, families turned to pantry essentials that delivered calories and sweetness without breaking their limited budgets. Enter the humble yet hearty molasses sandwich. Thick molasses, generously drizzled onto slices of bread and occasionally sprinkled with salt, emerged as a popular lunchtime choice, not just out of necessity, but because it provided a rare moment of sweet indulgence during tough times. Molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining, was affordable and accessible, often stored in large tins kept in kitchen pantries, becoming as familiar as flour or potatoes. Resourceful Depression-era homemakers appreciated that molasses offered not only sweetness, but essential nutrients like iron, magnesium, and calcium, long before modern health experts rediscovered its hidden nutritional punch. To combat monotony, some households cleverly balanced the syrupy sweetness by adding a pinch of salt, creating a flavor combination intriguing enough to make molasses sandwiches feel like a treat rather than a compromise. In fact, molasses was such a dependable Depression staple that families jokingly called it their liquid gold, humorously acknowledging its value while dreaming of better days. Equally offensive to most conservative taste palates were pineapple and cheese sandwiches. As of 2024, it is a well-established fact that the West and pineapples have had a very troubled relationship. Pineapples try their best for America, and America acts like an alcoholic husband that cannot notice his wife even on their anniversary. Back in the 70s, this was still a new culinary ground people were treading, just like ham and banana sandwiches. What they found was that it did not have the potential to go very mainstream, but it could grow itself a strong, loyal, and niche following. Most fans of this sandwich were in Hawaii, but in surrounding states, the trend took off moderately successfully. People loved the overly sweet and oddly comforting sensation of the sandwich, and we can see why. Pineapple and cheese sandwiches sound oddly delicious if you really think about it. In Depression-era kitchens, sorghum syrup quietly became a valuable pantry staple, sweetening life just enough to make tough days tolerable. The sorghum and butter sandwich, featuring rich sorghum syrup generously spread alongside butter, illustrated precisely how clever Depression cooks stretched limited resources into meals both comforting and economical. Sorghum, extracted from cane-like plants widely cultivated across the rural South and Midwest, was more affordable and easier to produce than refined sugar. Interestingly, families often pressed and boiled their own sorghum syrup at community gatherings, turning it into a social event where neighbors pooled resources and swapped stories, a rare, bright spot amid hardship. Butter, though pricier and rationed carefully, complemented the syrup's earthy sweetness, elevating plain bread into something genuinely indulgent. Historical cookbooks and agricultural pamphlets praised sorghum for its robust nutritional value, humorously labeling it nature's sweetest medicine, a tagline that perhaps oversold its virtues, but only slightly. Modern Americans might see the combination of syrup and butter as simply a makeshift dessert, yet to Depression families, it was an essential calorie boost, fueling long days of hard labor. The creamed corn sandwich was easy and quick to make. With just some creamed corn on buttered bread, you had a good lunch ready. Now, this used to be a lunch many people would pick for their long work days, but recently it has taken a nosedive in popularity. Of course, the vegan crowd still loves it as an alternative, but only a surprisingly 0.66% restaurants offer creamed corn sandwiches on their menus. Still, let's say you're trying to watch what you eat. Any better option than a creamy corn sandwich? Maybe, but you'd be hard-pressed to find one this easy to make. All you need is spices of your choice, some veggies like tomatoes and onions, or iceberg lettuce or slightly toasted cabbage, a good spreading of creamed corn, flat loaf bread, and you'll have this delicious sandwich that has now faded into the past. A sandwich that many do not even know exists. In Depression-era kitchens, yesterday's breakfast porridge could become today's lunch sandwich, thanks to an inventive approach known as the Oatmeal Patty sandwich. Resourceful homemakers combined leftover oatmeal with chopped onion and simple seasonings, shaping them into patties fried crisp in skillets. While oatmeal today is primarily breakfast food, during the 1930s, it was promoted as an affordable pantry essential, stretching limited budgets due to its low cost and nutritional value. Housewives jokingly remarked oatmeal's versatility was unmatched. It could feed you at dawn, reappear at noon, and somehow still taste different each time. Historical cooking guides enthusiastically recommended oatmeal patties as mock meat alternatives, cleverly imitating sausage texture without the expense of actual meat. Adding onions, readily available from backyard gardens or root cellars, provided flavor and depth, elevating simple oatmeal from bland necessity into something surprisingly satisfying. Once crisped in a skillet, these patties became sandwich-ready, easily slipped between slices of bread and served hot, making oatmeal suddenly exciting, words rarely uttered together. Speaking of meaty sandwiches, the Turkey Club sandwich was another fan favorite. Now, this one was known for its 3 layers of bread, which made it stand out from the rest of the sandwiches on the table. The club sandwich has its roots in American culinary history. with some sources suggesting it was first served in private social clubs in the late 19th century. By the time Grandma was making them, it had already become the talk of the town. Gram often made this one the day after Thanksgiving when there was no shortage of leftover roast turkey in the refrigerator. The key ingredient in this sandwich was crispy bacon, which Gram added to make it kid-friendly and 10 times more delicious. Grandma's turkey club sandwich was often cut in quarters or halves, which made it easier to eat, and this was the first time sandwiches were cut diagonally. And remember the toothpicks Gram used to hold it together with colorful cellophane frills? Brings back memories, doesn't it? When eggs became scarce during the Depression, Americans discovered a sandwich that cleverly defied logic, an eggless egg salad sandwich. At its heart, it was a crafty blend of crumbled tofu or leftover mashed potatoes combined with mustard, homemade mayonnaise substitutes, and chopped pickles. Though tofu may seem surprisingly trendy now, it had quietly existed in America since the late 1800s, mostly unnoticed until economic necessity thrust it into the spotlight. Families that couldn't access tofu creatively repurposed leftover mashed potatoes, turning yesterday's side dish into a satisfying sandwich filling. Depression-era homemakers found mustard's sharp bite and pickles' tanginess essential in creating the illusion of traditional egg salad flavor, ingeniously masking the absence of real eggs. Interestingly, mayonnaise substitutes, often a mixture of flour paste, vinegar, and seasoning, were promoted widely through government pamphlets and cooking columns as money-saving kitchen miracles. Food writers enthusiastically suggested these eggless spreads provided all of the flavor, none of the hen, helping families laugh through tough culinary adjustments. Bologna and cheese sandwiches were sandwiches that you could pull out of the refrigerator and have nobody raising any eyebrows, only happy smiles and eager stomachs. Bologna spreads were not too popular in America until the 70s when they first properly started picking up some steam. People got on the bandwagon once bologna and pepperoni pizzas started becoming regular takeout options in states like New York and Chicago. If it works on a pizza by the laws of nature, it must be tried on a sandwich or burger too. We are not sure who came up with that rule of thumb, but they were really onto something, because this made for a great sandwich that was a meal people ate when all there was for dinner was sleep. While a lot of those cheeses and spreads got discontinued now, we would love to try an authentic sandwich from the 70s because it sounds right up our alley. In Depression-era kitchens, nothing green escaped the resourceful eye of American homemakers, not even celery leaves, the unsung heroes at the top of the stalk. These leafy leftovers starred in the celery leaf sandwich, a sandwich created by chopping tender celery greens, lightly salting them, and buttering them generously between slices of bread. Today, most cooks casually discard celery leaves without a second thought. But during the 1930s, throwing away anything edible felt as reckless as burning dollar bills. Celery itself was inexpensive and readily available, often grown at home or bought cheaply at markets. However, the leaves offered a frugal bonus, rich in nutrients and flavor. Savvy cooks of the Depression recognized celery leaves had a slightly peppery taste, perfect for transforming plain bread into something fresh-tasting and surprisingly elegant. Historical home economics columns humorously urged housewives never to waste celery leaves, suggesting that to do so would mean missing out on a luxury sandwich costing mere pennies. Indeed, celery leaf sandwiches earned a reputation as budget-friendly sophistication, making appearances at ladies' luncheons where no one dared reveal the secret ingredient came straight from vegetable trimmings. The key to a good sandwich was in its simple ingredients, and Gram knew it better than anyone. That's why she whipped up the classic chicken salad sandwich anytime we craved some comfort food. Chicken salad has been a beloved dish in American homes since the mid-1800s. Grandma decided to make it into a hearty sandwich to make snack time better. Grandma's version of the chicken salad sandwich often included unique ingredients passed down through generations. Depending on where your grandma hails from, her chicken salad sandwich recipe might have a regional flair. In the South, you might find it spiced with a bit of mustard or pickle juice, while in New England, cranberries might be tossed in for a touch of tartness. When times grew tough in Depression-era America, families turned to preserving foods, making homemade spreads like apple butter, a prized pantry staple. The apple butter and cheese sandwich, a modest pairing of homemade apple butter and thinly sliced cheese, became a favorite because it cleverly combined two readily available ingredients into a filling, flavorful meal. Apple butter, a concentrated sweet spread slowly simmered from bruised or imperfect apples, allowed families to make use of fruit that otherwise might have gone to waste. Apples were abundant and inexpensive during the fall harvest, so resourceful home cooks preserved them carefully to ensure supplies lasted through harsher winter months. Cheese, although slightly more precious, was often rationed in thin slices, stretching each small block to maximize meals without emptying the purse. Cookbooks of the 1930s praised apple butter sandwiches as a satisfying way to provide necessary calories cheaply, perhaps quietly suggesting they tasted better than some other thrift-driven concoctions. The meatball sub is the kind of sandwich that's meant to be messy. The meatball sub has its origins in Italian-American cuisine. While meatballs are a traditional Italian dish, the meatball sub became popular in the U.S. as Italian immigrants put an American twist to it. We're talking juicy meatballs, marinara sauce topped with melted cheese on a long, crusty roll. Yeah, it doesn't really get more American than this. What makes or breaks this sandwich is the sauce, and Grandma knew it all too well. The sauce had to be the right balance of sweetness and acidity, and of course, the bread had to be sturdy enough to hold everything together. It's the kind of sandwich that you need two hands to eat, and maybe a napkin or two, but it's worth every bite. It's a classic comfort food that never goes out of style. Exotic fruits like bananas became virtually unattainable luxuries during the economic hardships of the 1930s, prompting desperate yet brilliant substitutions from ordinary American pantries. Enter the mock banana sandwich, cleverly disguising boiled mashed parsnips sweetened with sugar and a dash of artificial banana flavoring. Parsnips, previously overlooked root vegetables that thrived in backyard gardens, found unexpected stardom in this culinary sleight of hand. Housewives quickly realized their earthy taste softened when boiled, making them surprisingly receptive to imitation fruit flavors. Banana extract, once used sparingly in desserts, was suddenly celebrated for turning humble parsnips into a believable tropical treat. It's ironic that parsnips were elevated from root cellar obscurity to sandwich fame simply because real bananas became too costly for most American tables. Historical records show these sandwiches appeared regularly in Depression-era cookbooks, praised as creative alternatives that allowed families to maintain dietary variety despite limited budgets. Of course, modern taste buds might question whether parsnips truly captured the banana experience. After all, impersonating fruit is tough business. But many Depression-era children reportedly enjoyed the illusion enough to ask for seconds. Peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwiches, Liberty sandwiches, or fluffernutters, are basically just marshmallow cream on one bread and peanut butter on the other. Despite having like 3 legal government names, it is surprisingly a one-trick pony. But that one trick does wonders on an empty stomach, whether you needed a quick hit of sugar or a comfort snack to make the long shift pass by easier. These were just the sandwiches for the job. Fluffernutters also got really popular among children, and customizing them to make these cute aesthetic sandwiches was a popular hobby for kindergarten would-be chefs. Not something you would see on Hell's Kitchen, but something that puts a sweet smile on your day. Imagining the flavors is a bit difficult, so giving this certified beauty a shot is definitely on our list. One of the best descriptors we can offer is visualizing hot marshmallows dipped in peanut butter. And does that not sound just wonderful? For American families battling tight budgets during the Great Depression, innovation became the true mother of necessity, especially when pairing unlikely pantry items like peanut butter and pickles. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich, featuring crunchy peanut butter generously layered alongside sliced dill pickles, was one clever response to empty cupboards. Peanut butter surged in popularity during the 1930s, partly because it provided inexpensive protein at a fraction of the cost of meat. Pickles, meanwhile, represented resourceful preservation, allowing frugal households to stretch cucumber harvests throughout the entire year. Combining these affordable staples, home cooks found the creamy, salty peanut butter balanced perfectly with the tangy bite of dill pickles, making an oddly delicious sandwich. Notably, newspapers of the Depression era often recommended peanut butter sandwiches precisely for their nutrition, calling them a poor man's steak, while pickles added zest, vitamins, and some much-needed crunch. Though today's diners might initially raise an eyebrow at this unusual duo, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches weren't considered oddities back then. You can't have a conversation about classic grandma sandwiches without bringing up the egg salad sandwich. This sandwich started out as an economical way of using up extra eggs. Eggs were a budget-friendly protein source, and this sandwich with just a few ingredients from the pantry. This one also used mayo to bind the sandwich together, but some grandmas added a bit of mustard for a tangy kick. This was a post-Easter favorite, as after the holiday ended, there were plenty of hard-boiled eggs on hand, and of course Graham didn't let anything go to waste. You can make this one yourself with some store-bought egg salad, but it won't taste the same as it did back in the day. In Depression-era kitchens, dessert leftovers found new life as inventive sandwich fillings, notably the sweet yet tangy vinegar pie filling sandwich. At first glance, the idea of vinegar pie itself might seem a culinary contradiction, but during the 1930s, it exemplified resourcefulness at its finest. Traditional fruits like apples or cherries grew scarce and pricey, compelling cooks to mimic their tart flavors using vinegar, sugar, and simple pantry staples. Homemakers discovered that leftover filling, sweet, tart, and silky, could transform plain bread slices into unexpectedly delightful sandwiches. Surprisingly, vinegar pie's popularity was well documented, featured regularly in women's magazines and cooking columns, praising the ingenuity behind making pies without fruit. Jokes circulated that vinegar pies were an acquired taste, but one gladly acquired when wallets stayed empty and stomachs demanded satisfaction. Beyond mere novelty, this filling cleverly balanced flavor profiles, providing sweetness from sugar and a satisfying tartness from vinegar, which together could fool the palate into tasting apples or lemons. So, this next sandwich is also typically made from only 3 ingredients, but it's still one of Grandma's most iconic creations. I'm talking about the infamous BLT sandwich. The name is an abbreviation for the ingredients: bacon, lettuce, and tomato. This sandwich was a summertime favorite, especially when tomatoes were at their ripest in Graham's garden. The BLT's roots can be traced back to tea sandwiches served in the late 19th century, but it wasn't until World War II when it gained popularity. During this time, supermarkets made bacon, lettuce, and tomatoes more widely available all year round, and Grandma made sure to use them up in the kitchen. A classic BLT is often made with mayonnaise, but some purists argue that the sandwich should be spread with butter instead. Well, it's still up for debate, so make sure to let us know your take on it in the comments. When Depression-era households craved ham sandwiches but found their wallets emptier than the pantry, cooks turned to an inventive stand-in: the mock ham sandwich, cleverly crafted from slices of canned luncheon meat, seasoned and fried to taste surprisingly like ham. Luncheon meat, an affordable, shelf-stable canned pork product, quickly became essential in kitchens during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Initially viewed skeptically, homemakers discovered that a little ingenuity with seasoning could convincingly transform canned meat into a delicious ham substitute, saving both pride and pennies. Seasoned lightly with brown sugar or cloves, then crisped in a skillet, this economical alternative provided families the illusion of a savory deli sandwich even when the nearest delicatessen was financially unreachable. Historical cookbooks and newspaper columns enthusiastically promoted luncheon meat as a reliable budget saver, humorously advising cooks to season liberally, since anything tastes better fried. Remarkably, luncheon meat surged in popularity during the Depression precisely because it was both accessible and adaptable, often distributed widely as government aid. A rather repulsive combo for some and appealing taste for others. The anchovy paste sandwich is a savory spread made from anchovy paste. This is less of a sandwich and more of a versatile condiment, but it does work extremely well on sandwiches, especially because the bread balances out the anchovy's taste. Historically, anchovy paste has always been used to give flavor and some pros to your health, But in the USA, it picked steam as a spread for sandwiches. You can spice this up with fried eggplants, tomatoes, chopped chicken chunks, a salad dressing, or anything you can imagine. This is one of those sandwiches where every time you try it, you can experiment. At a time when pantries were sparse, one modest vegetable quietly rose to culinary prominence, notably paired with vinegar to create the onion and vinegar sandwich. Thinly sliced onions marinated in tangy vinegar with just a pinch of sugar might sound like a questionable lunch choice today, but during the Great Depression, this humble sandwich was a household staple. Vinegar, cheaply produced and easily accessible, became an indispensable tool for Depression-era cooks trying to stretch limited ingredients into flavorful meals. Onions thrived effortlessly in backyard gardens, making them abundant even when money was scarce. But onions had another appeal. Their sharp bite helped mask the taste of stale bread, a constant companion during hard economic times. Home cooks discovered that marinating onions briefly in vinegar not only mellowed their pungency, but also produced a refreshingly tart flavor, transforming the simplest sandwich into a delicacy. Remarkably, onions were so valued that Depression-era food guides suggested planting them as an emergency food supply, alongside potatoes. This sandwich perfectly encapsulated the ingenuity of an era when resourcefulness wasn't merely admirable, but essential for survival. When it comes to sandwiches, only a few were as satisfying as the roast beef sandwich. So, many sandwiches were originally created as a clever way to repurpose leftovers, and this one was no exception. Roast beef sandwiches often started with leftovers from Sunday dinner. The Sunday roast was a time-honored tradition, and any extra beef was used to make delicious sandwiches for lunch the next day. In 1900, the dish was described by the Washington Post as unattractive and as a tired ark in a gravy flood. However, it gained popularity in the coming years when Grandma decided to take matters into her own hands, and by 1931, some critics even went as far as to describe it as a true taste of South Dakota. The bread for Grandma's roast beef sandwich was often homemade, and boy did she know how to dress it up. Whether it was a dollop of horseradish sauce, a spread of mustard, or a smear of mayonnaise, Gram knew exactly what it needed, and if we got lucky, she even snuck in a slice of cheese. The mock ham salad sandwich was a popular sandwich that people chose to make when they had every ingredient but ham in their fridge. The sandwich was a perfect mix for when people had leftovers in the past. Using some mayo, boiled eggs, and pickles with the right seasoning was paired up with ingredients they scavenged from the back of their freezer to create a mock ham salad sandwich. The recipe was as simple as that, which made it a go-to sandwich for people looking to empty their fridge. As time passed, the need for having mock ham instead of real ham lowered. With less and less people creating this sandwich, like all the sandwiches on this list, it faded into history. But the simple nature of the recipe allowed for the method of making this sandwich to be preserved for future sandwich enthusiasts to see. The Pimento Cheese sandwich is a Southern classic made with a spread of grated cheese, mayonnaise, and pimientos, typically served on white bread. This sandwich was once a staple at luncheons and picnics, but has become less common in recent times. The peak its popularity was definitely during the 20th century, mostly as a homemade snack. The conventional prep would be pimiento peppers and cheese, soft or grilled, usually cream, spread across 2 loaves of bread. It declined as a go-to snack after WW II, but the South remembers favorably the delicious pimiento sandwiches their grandmothers would whip up. Does it get any nostalgia going for you? This sandwich definitely rings some bells in the minds of Southerners, though it's hard to find places offering to create this now-forgotten sandwich. Corn has long been the reliable companion of American families, especially during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Frugality in the Depression-era kitchen meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful mattered, leading to innovative dishes like the creamed corn sandwich. This sandwich featured leftover creamed corn thickened just enough to spread between slices of bread, transforming last night's side dish into today's main event. Corn was abundant, affordable, and deeply woven into American culinary heritage, so turning leftovers into sandwiches wasn't merely thrifty, it was practical culinary genius. Homemakers quickly realized that leftover creamed corn, thickened slightly with flour or stale breadcrumbs, could yield a surprisingly tasty sandwich spread. Creamed corn sandwiches became a clever way to feed large families without extra expense, all while sneaking in essential nutrients and fiber. Historical pamphlets even encouraged homemakers to use corn creatively, describing it humorously as the vegetable that kept giving, since families would see it repeatedly at meals, sometimes more than they wished. The 1970s knew how to pack flavor, memory, and a little chaos between two slices of bread. Got a favorite or one you dare to try? Drop it in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more bites of the past.